The crash of 7 metal trays hitting the cafeteria floor at 11:47 a.m. created a symphony of chaos that made 200 staff members at Roosevelt High turn their heads in unison. The sound echoed through the vast dining hall like thunder, bouncing off the mint green walls that hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the Clinton administration. Marlo Ashford, 42 years old, and only 3 days into her job as a cafeteria worker, found herself on her knees, gathering the scattered trays while trembling fingers betrayed a nervousness that seemed oddly misplaced for someone who had once commanded military operations in classified locations across 3 continents. Above her towered Thaddeus Blackstone, the chemistry teacher whose 18 years at Roosevelt High had transformed him from an idealistic educator into something far more sinister. His shadow fell across Marlo like a storm cloud, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that made even the principal think twice before challenging him. "Careful there, new girl. This cafeteria isn't meant for the clumsy or weak. Perhaps you should consider whether food service is really your calling." Marlo's hand paused over the last tray, and for just a moment, anyone watching closely might have noticed the V-shaped scar on her wrist catch the fluorescent light. She looked up at Thaddeus with eyes that held something he couldn't quite place. Not fear, not submission, but something colder, more calculating. "I understand perfectly, sir. Every workplace has its challenges." She rose to her feet with a fluidity that contradicted her supposedly nervous demeanor, holding the stack of trays against her chest like a shield. "I'm sure I'll adapt quickly to the environment here." The tension in that moment was palpable enough that several teachers eating their lunch forgot to chew, watching this strange interaction between the powerful chemistry teacher and the new cafeteria worker who seemed both intimidated and somehow unbreakable. Thaddeus studied her for another heartbeat, his gray eyes narrowing as if trying to solve a particularly complex equation, before turning on his heel and striding toward the faculty section of the cafeteria, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the linoleum with military precision. "What you're about to hear might make you question everything you thought you knew about corruption in our education system. If this story of one woman's courage against impossible odds moves you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of everyday heroes standing up to injustice. And if you believe stories like Marlo's deserve to be told, that thanks button below helps us continue exposing the truth that powerful people don't want you to know." Marlo watched him go, her expression carefully neutral while her mind catalogued every detail. The way he favored his left leg slightly, suggesting an old injury. The Patek Philippe watch that cost more than a teacher's annual salary. The slight bulge in his jacket pocket that could have been a phone, but moved like something heavier. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous predators often disguise themselves in the most mundane clothing. And Thaddeus Blackstone was setting off every instinct she had developed during 15 years of service that officially never happened. The Roosevelt High Cafeteria served 1,200 students and 300 staff members daily, a massive operation that required military-level logistics to function smoothly. Marlo had specifically chosen this job after scanning through dozens of employment opportunities in the tri-state area. Not because she needed the money. Her military pension, though classified at a level that made it appear modest on paper, was more than sufficient. She had come here for Zenith, her 19-year-old daughter, who still struggled with the neurological damage from an incident 4 years ago that the school district had swept under the rug with frightening efficiency. "You handled that well," came a voice from behind the serving counter. Beatrice Cray, another cafeteria worker who had started just 2 weeks before Marlo, was arranging today's lunch options with movements that seemed too precise, too observant for someone who supposedly spent her days ladling mac and cheese. Thaddeus likes to test the new employees, sees who breaks, who bends, who fights back. Marlowe set the trays in the sanitizing station, noting how Beatrice's eyes tracked every person entering and leaving the cafeteria, how her stance kept her body angled to maintain sight lines to all exits. And what happens to those who fight back? They usually don't last long enough for anyone to remember their names. Beatrice's smile didn't reach her eyes. But something tells me you might be different. Before Marlowe could respond, the lunch rush began. Students flooded in like a tide, their voices creating a cacophony that would have overwhelmed someone without training in maintaining focus under auditory assault. She served food with mechanical efficiency, while her real attention focused on observing patterns. The way certain students avoided the meat products entirely. How teachers would quietly warn their favorite students to pack lunches from home. The grimace that flickered across faces when they bit into what was supposedly fresh fruit, but had the texture of something that had been frozen and thawed multiple times. At 12:35 p.m., she noticed something that made her pause mid-scoop. Thaddeus was in the back storage area, an area where teachers had no legitimate reason to be. Through the small window in the swinging door, she could see him examining boxes with Apex Foods labels, running his finger along delivery dates with an expression of satisfaction that seemed bizarre for someone inspecting cafeteria supplies. "Don't stare too long," Beatrice murmured, suddenly beside her. "He doesn't like being watched when he's doing his inspections." Inspections? He's a chemistry teacher, not a health inspector. Thaddeus Blackstone is many things beyond what his job title suggests. Beatrice's voice dropped even lower. "Did you know he's been here longer than any other teacher? Survived 4 principals, 2 superintendents, and a complete school board turnover. Man like that doesn't maintain power without having his fingers in multiple pies." The phrase triggered something in Marlowe's memory, a similar expression used in an intelligence briefing about shell companies laundering money through institutional food services. She filed it away while maintaining her cover, sighing with apparent exhaustion. "I just want to do my job and go home to my daughter." "Daughter?" Beatrice's interest sharpened. "How old?" 19. She's special needs. Has been since an incident a few years ago." Marlowe let genuine emotion creep into her voice, the one thing that wasn't part of her cover. "That's why I took this job. The hours let me be home when she needs me." That afternoon, as Marlowe cleaned the serving stations, she discovered something that made her military-trained composure crack slightly. Hidden behind a stack of outdated nutrition posters was a clipboard with shipping manifests dating back 6 months. Each one had been altered, professionally, but not professionally enough to fool someone who had spent years detecting forged documents in hostile territories. Delivery dates had been changed, expiration dates modified, and quantities adjusted. The hamburger meat scheduled for tomorrow's lunch had actually arrived 3 weeks ago and should have been discarded after 72 hours. She photographed each page with a phone that appeared to be a basic model, but contained modifications that would make the NSA jealous, then carefully replaced everything exactly as she had found it. 20 minutes later, Thaddeus appeared in the serving area, his presence as sudden and unsettling as a cold draft. "Finding everything you need, Miss Ashford?" The use of her last name was deliberate, a power play designed to establish dominance. "Just familiarizing myself with the inventory system, Mr. Blackstone. I like to be thorough in my work. Thoroughness can be a dangerous quality in the wrong hands." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Tom Ford," she noted, another expense beyond a teacher's salary. This cafeteria runs on established systems that have worked perfectly for years. I would hate to see someone disrupt that balance because they thought they knew better. Of course not, sir. I'm just here to serve food and clean tables. His smile was as cold as winter moonlight. Good, because Roosevelt High has ways of dealing with troublemakers. Just ask Penelope Marsh. Who? Exactly. He walked away, leaving Marlowe to process the implicit threat. A quick search on her phone revealed that Penelope Marsh had been a cafeteria worker who had filed a complaint about food safety 3 years ago. She had been fired for allegedly stealing supplies, arrested on charges that were later dropped, and had moved out of state after her daughter was expelled from Roosevelt on dubious disciplinary grounds. That evening, Marlowe arrived home to find her mailbox stuffed with flyers from Apex Foods, advertising their commitment to student nutrition and their partnership with dedicated educators like Thaddeus Blackstone. The fact that Thaddeus was mentioned by name in a food supplier's promotional material set off alarms that had nothing to do with paranoia and everything to do with pattern recognition. Zenith was in the living room, working through her physical therapy exercises with the dedication of someone who refused to let her limitations define her. The tremor in her left hand was barely noticeable now, a vast improvement from 4 years ago when she couldn't hold a pencil. "How was your first week, Mom?" "Educational," Marlowe replied, setting down her bag that contained far more than just a lunch and car keys. "I'm learning a lot about how things really work." "You're using your colonel voice," Zenith observed with a slight smile. "That means something's wrong." Marlowe had never told her daughter about her real military rank or the true nature of her service, but children of intelligence officers develop their own kind of radar. Just some workplace politics. Nothing I can't handle. That night, after Zenith had gone to bed, Marlowe accessed databases that civilians didn't know existed. Thaddeus Blackstone's financial records painted a picture that would have been invisible to anyone without her specific training. Deposits that coincided with Apex Foods contracts. Property holdings under shell companies that traced back to addresses associated with food distribution centers. Most damning of all, a 35% stake in Apex Foods itself, hidden behind 3 layers of corporate obfuscation. The next morning, she arrived at work to find her car tires slashed. All 4 of them, cut with surgical precision that spoke of deliberate intimidation rather than random vandalism. The security camera that should have captured the incident had mysteriously malfunctioned between 3 and 4 a.m. "Car trouble?" Thaddeus asked with false concern as she entered the cafeteria 15 minutes late. "These things happen in this neighborhood. Maybe you should consider parking somewhere safer." "Thank you for your concern," Marlowe replied evenly. "I'll certainly be more careful." The morning proceeded with artificial normalcy until she opened the shipment of hamburger meat. The smell hit her immediately, not quite rotten, but wrong in a way that made her stomach turn. The expiration date on the package had been replaced with a new label, but underneath, she could feel the raised numbers of the original date. This meat was 3 weeks past safe consumption. "Is there a problem?" Beatrice appeared at her shoulder, her expression carefully neutral. "This meat is bad. We can't serve this to students." "The label says it's fine." "The label is lying." Marlowe's voice carried the authority of someone who had made life-and-death decisions. "I won't serve contaminated food to children." "Marlowe," Beatrice's voice held a warning. "You've been here less than a week. Don't make waves you can't surf." But Marlowe had already made her decision. She sealed the contaminated meat in hazmat bags and marked them for disposal. Within minutes, Thaddeus materialized like a demon summoned by defiance. What exactly do you think you're doing? Preventing food poisoning. This meat is contaminated. That meat passed all safety inspections. You're overstepping your authority. Then I'll report it to the health department. The cafeteria went silent. Every employee, every early arriving teacher seemed to hold their breath. Thaddeus's face flushed red, then went pale, then settled into something more dangerous than anger. You have no idea what you're playing with, Miss Ashford. This goes far deeper than spoiled meat. Then maybe it's time someone started digging. That afternoon, she received 17 emails from parents complaining about her rude behavior and inappropriate handling of food. The emails all came from different accounts, but used suspiciously similar phrasing and had been sent within a 3-minute window. When she traced the IP addresses, a skill that wasn't exactly standard for cafeteria workers, they all originated from the same VPN, one that Thaddeus had accessed from his classroom computer. Marlowe just discovered Thaddeus is manufacturing fake complaints to get her fired. What would you do in her position? Fight back publicly or gather more evidence in secret? Drop your strategy in the comments below. I'm curious how you would handle this level of corruption. The psychological warfare escalated over the next 3 days. Her locker was filled with rotting food. Her time card mysteriously disappeared, making it look like she hadn't shown up for work. Someone called Child Protective Services with an anonymous tip that she was neglecting her disabled daughter. Each attack was carefully calculated to destabilize without leaving fingerprints that could be traced back to Thaddeus. But Marlowe had survived interrogation resistance training that made these amateur tactics look like schoolyard bullying. She documented everything, building a file that would have impressed the FBI agents she had once worked alongside. More importantly, she began to notice patterns in the food shipments that suggested something far more sinister than simple corruption. On Thursday, she made a breakthrough. While cleaning out an old storage closet, she found records from 2019 that everyone thought had been destroyed in a convenient flood. 340 students had been hospitalized with severe food poisoning that year. The incident had been blamed on a norovirus outbreak, but the medical records, which shouldn't have been in a school closet, told a different story. The symptoms were consistent with bacterial contamination from expired meat, the same kind of meat that Apex Foods specialized in providing at below-market rates. The records also contained something that made Marlowe's blood run cold. Among the hospitalized students was a 15-year-old girl named Zenith Palmer. Her own daughter had been one of the victims, poisoned by the very corruption she was now uncovering. She photographed every document, uploaded them to multiple secure cloud servers, and created an encrypted timeline that connected Thaddeus's financial records to the 2019 outbreak. The evidence was damning, but she needed more. She needed to prove current criminal activity, not just past negligence. That opportunity came the next morning when she arrived early and found Thaddeus in a heated discussion with a man in an expensive suit. Through creative positioning of her phone and exceptional audio equipment that definitely wasn't standard issue for civilians, she captured their entire conversation. "The FBI is sniffing around Apex," the suit was saying. "We need to clean house." "How much time do we have?" Thaddeus asked. "Maybe 2 weeks. We need to move the offshore accounts and destroy any paper trail connecting you to the 2019 incident." "What about the new cafeteria worker? She's been asking questions." "Then make her stop asking. You've handled problems before, Thaddeus. Handle this one." After the man left, Marlowe watched Thaddeus make 3 phone calls. The first was to someone named Cornelius. She recognized the name as the school principal, Cornelius Wade. The second was to someone he addressed as Your Honor, discussing how to legally terminate an employee without cause. The third made her grip her phone so tightly the case cracked. I need 3 people to pose as concerned parents at Monday's school board meeting. Make sure their complaints about the new cafeteria worker are specific and emotional. I want her gone by Tuesday. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Marlowe used every contact from her former life, calling in favors from people whose names appeared in no directory. By Sunday night, she had assembled a dossier that would have made Woodward and Bernstein weep with envy. Financial records, audio recordings, falsified documents, and a clear pattern of corruption spanning 5 years and affecting 12 schools across the district. Monday morning arrived with the kind of dramatic weather that seemed scripted. Dark clouds rolling in from the east, thunder rumbling like divine displeasure. Marlowe arrived at work to find 3 people in the cafeteria claiming to be concerned parents. They were good actors, she had to admit, but not good enough to fool someone who had spent years identifying foreign operatives. This woman refused to serve my son because he couldn't pay, one woman claimed, tears streaming down her face. She humiliated him in front of everyone. She threw away good food while children went hungry, another added, his indignation Oscar-worthy. The third, a man who kept touching his ear like someone wearing a wire for the first time, declared, "She's been taking pictures of students without permission. I think she might be some kind of predator." The accusations were serious enough that Principal Wade had to respond. He arrived within minutes, Thaddeus at his side like a shadow. "Miss Ashford, these are serious allegations. I'm afraid we'll need to suspend you pending investigation." "Of course," Marlowe replied calmly. "I understand you have to follow protocol. But before I go, perhaps these concerned parents could provide some identification, and maybe explain why they're all wearing visitor badges with consecutive numbers, suggesting they arrived together despite claiming not to know each other." The actors froze. One started to speak, but Thaddeus cut him off. "How dare you question these concerned citizens?" "I'm not questioning them. I'm just noting that the woman claiming her son goes here is wearing a wedding ring that's been off her finger. So recently there's still a tan line suggesting she put it on just for this performance. The gentleman on the left has traces of stage makeup on his collar. And our friend with the earpiece is receiving instructions from someone, probably sitting in a van outside." Principal Wade looked between Thaddeus and the supposed parents, confusion replacing his initial certainty. "What's going on here?" Before anyone could answer, Beatrice Cray stood up from where she'd been quietly observing. "I think I can explain that, Principal Wade." She reached into her pocket and produced a badge that made everyone in the room freeze. "Special Agent Beatrice Cray, FBI. We've been investigating Apex Foods and their connection to multiple food poisoning incidents across the state." The revelation hit the room like a lightning strike. The 3 actors immediately tried to leave, but found their path blocked by 2 more agents who had been posing as janitors. Thaddeus's face went through a spectrum of emotions before settling on cornered fury. "You set me up," he snarled at Marlowe. "Oh," she replied evenly. "You set yourself up 5 years ago when you decided profit was more important than children's lives. I just made sure someone was watching when you did it again." The truth is finally coming out, but Thaddeus won't go down without a fight. The school board meeting tonight is where everything will explode. Keep watching to see how one cafeteria worker brings down an entire corruption network, and remember, the most dangerous person in any room is often the one everyone underestimates. The school board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., but by 6:30, the auditorium was already packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through social media like wildfire. screenshots of falsified documents, snippets of audio recordings, and most damning of all, a video of Thaddeus attempting to bribe a health inspector that Marlowe had captured just that morning. The crowd wasn't just parents and teachers anymore. Reporters from 3 major networks had set up cameras, and the FBI presence was impossible to miss. Thaddeus arrived in his best suit, flanked by Augustus Flint, the union lawyer whose reputation for getting corrupt teachers off the hook was legendary. They moved through the crowd like sharks through water, confident despite the circumstances. Marlowe watched from her position near the side entrance, noting how Thaddeus kept checking his phone, probably communicating with whoever was really pulling the strings at Apex Foods. "Nervous?" Beatrice asked, appearing beside her with the silent approach that confirmed she was indeed federal law enforcement. "I've testified before congressional committees about operations that don't officially exist," Marlowe replied quietly. "A school board meeting doesn't exactly register on my anxiety scale. They still don't know who you really are, do they? They're about to find out." The meeting was called to order at 7:05 p.m. by School Board President Geraldine Hawk, a 70-year-old former principal who had seen every type of scandal education could produce. "We're here tonight to address serious allegations regarding food safety violations and potential criminal corruption within our district. Miss Ashford, as the complainant, you have the floor." Marlowe walked to the podium with measured steps, carrying a laptop and a stack of documents that represented weeks of investigation compressed into days. She connected her laptop to the projection system, and suddenly the screen behind her filled with evidence that made the audience gasp. "My name is Marlowe Ashford, and until 3 weeks ago, I was Colonel Marlowe Ashford of the United States Army Intelligence Corps, specializing in counterintelligence and anti-corruption operations. I retired to care for my daughter, who was permanently disabled by food poisoning at this very school in 2019. The revelation sent shockwaves through the auditorium. Thaddeus half rose from his seat before Augustus pulled him back down. Principal Wade looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "What you're looking at," Marlowe continued, bringing up a complex financial chart, "is a money laundering operation that has stolen approximately $2.3 million from school nutrition programs across 12 schools, poisoned over 300 students, and corrupted multiple officials at every level of the district administration." She clicked to the next slide. Thaddeus's hidden ownership stake in Apex Foods, documented with SEC filings that had been buried under shell companies. Mr. Blackstone owns 35% of Apex Foods through a series of holding companies registered in Delaware. Every substandard meal, every expired product, every case of food poisoning, he profited from all of it. "This is slander!" Augustus Flint stood up, his face red with manufactured outrage. "My client is a dedicated educator with an impeccable record. An impeccable record of taking bribes," Marlowe interrupted, clicking to show bank records. 17 deposits of exactly $9,999, just under the federal reporting requirement, all made within days of Apex Foods receiving new contracts. "Would you like me to show the correspondence where your client specifically requested the amounts be kept under $10,000? The lawyer sat back down, his protest dying on his lips. Marlowe continued her presentation with military precision. Email chains showing Thaddeus coordinating with Apex executives to substitute Grade D meat for Grade A. Photographs of altered expiration dates. Health inspection reports that had been falsified with Thaddeus's digital signature. Each piece of evidence built upon the last, creating an undeniable picture of systematic corruption. "But the real crime," she said, her voice dropping to a tone that commanded absolute attention, is this? The screen filled with hospital records from 2019. Names and faces of students who had been poisoned, including a 15-year-old girl with bright eyes and a brilliant smile. Zenith Palmer, my daughter, honor roll student, varsity swimmer, accepted early admission to MIT, until she ate a contaminated hamburger from this school's cafeteria and suffered bacterial meningitis that left her with permanent neurological damage. The auditorium was silent except for the sound of someone crying in the back rows. Marlowe clicked again, showing Zenith's medical bills. $3 million in medical costs. Years of physical therapy. A brilliant future destroyed. And when I tried to investigate what happened, I was told it was just an unfortunate norovirus outbreak. No one to blame. No one responsible. She turned to look directly at Thaddeus. Except someone was responsible. You were responsible. You knew that meat was contaminated. You have the email right here where the Apex Quality Control Manager warned you about bacterial levels. Your response? Quote, ship it anyway. Kids have strong immune systems. End quote. Thaddeus stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this circus. Come on, Augustus. We're leaving. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Special Agent Cray announced from the back of the room. Thaddeus Blackstone, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, endangering public health, money laundering, and 17 other federal charges. You have the right to remain silent. Wait! Thaddeus shouted, his composure finally cracking. You don't understand. I'm not the one in charge. It goes higher than me. Way higher. Then you'd better start talking, another FBI agent said, moving to block the exit. Thaddeus looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. Principal Wade is my brother-in-law. He's been covering for me for years. The superintendent takes a cut, too. 20% of everything. There's a whole network. Shut up, you idiot! Cornelius Wade jumped to his feet, but two agents were already moving toward him. What followed was chaos. Accusations flew as conspirators turned on each other, each trying to minimize their own involvement while maximizing others. Through it all, Marlowe stood at the podium, calmly documenting every confession with the recording equipment she had set up. Augustus Flint, seeing which way the wind was blowing, suddenly announced, My client would like to make a deal. He has information about Apex Foods operations in 6 other states. That's a conversation for federal prosecutors, Agent Cray replied, handcuffs clicking around Thaddeus's wrists. But I wouldn't count on any deals. We already have everything we need, thanks to Miss Ashford's thorough investigation. As Thaddeus was led away, he turned back to Marlowe with pure hatred in his eyes. You've destroyed everything. Do you have any idea how many people depended on this operation? How many jobs you've just eliminated? You mean how many criminals I've exposed? Marlowe's voice was ice. You poisoned my daughter. You poisoned hundreds of children. You did it for money, and you would have kept doing it if I hadn't stopped you. The only thing I regret is that I can't arrest you twice. The school board meeting continued for another 2 hours, as the full scope of the corruption was revealed. Apex Foods had been operating in 43 districts across 6 states, with Thaddeus as their primary inside coordinator. The company's executives were arrested simultaneously in a coordinated FBI raid that had been planned for weeks, with Marlowe's evidence providing the final pieces needed for prosecution. By 10 p.m., the auditorium had mostly emptied except for reporters conducting interviews and FBI agents collecting additional statements. Marlowe stood outside in the cool night air, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of the past weeks. That was impressive, Beatrice said, joining her. We've been trying to crack this case for 2 years. You did it in less than 3 weeks. I had better motivation than you did. It was personal. What will you do now? The FBI could use someone with your skills. Marlo shook her head. I'm done with that life. I just want to take care of my daughter and maybe make sure kids in this district get decent meals for once. The next morning, Roosevelt High's cafeteria was transformed. With Thaddeus arrested and Principal Wade suspended pending investigation, the school board had emergency authority to make immediate changes. They offered Marlo the position of food services director for the entire district, which she accepted on the condition that she could implement military-grade food safety standards. Within a week, Apex Foods contracts were terminated across all affected districts. A new supplier, vetted by both the FBI and independent auditors, was brought in. Fresh fruits and vegetables replaced processed foods. Grade A meat replaced the mysterious substances that had been passed off as protein. The transformation was so dramatic that students actually started looking forward to lunch. 3 months later, Marlo stood in a completely renovated cafeteria, watching students enjoy meals that were both nutritious and safe. The walls had been repainted in warm, inviting colors. New equipment gleamed in the kitchen. A salad bar offered fresh options that changed daily. Zenith visited during lunch, her walk steadier than it had been in years. The new treatments, funded by the settlement from the criminal case, were working better than anyone had hoped. Mom, this place looks amazing. It's what it should have been all along. You know Thaddeus got 15 years, right? It was on the news this morning. 15 years for him, 12 for Wade, and the Apex executives got 20 to life. Plus, the district won a $50 million settlement that's going entirely to improving food services and compensating victims. And you did all that while pretending to be just a cafeteria worker. Marlo smiled, watching a group of students enthusiastically debating whether the new pizza was better than the tacos. Sometimes, the most powerful position is the one nobody expects. Thaddeus thought I was beneath his notice because I wore an apron and served food. That blindness was his downfall. A young teacher approached nervously. Ms. Ashford, I just wanted to thank you. My students were getting sick all the time before, and I couldn't figure out why. Now they're healthier, more focused, doing better in class. You've changed everything. After the teacher left, Zenith squeezed her mother's hand. Dad would have been proud of you. He would have been proud of both of us. You for fighting through your recovery, and me for finally finding a battle worth fighting. The lunch bell rang, and hundreds of students flooded into the cafeteria. Where once there had been resignation and complaints, now there was genuine excitement. The serving line moved efficiently, staffed by workers who took pride in their jobs, knowing they were part of something important. Marlo took her position behind the serving counter, not because she had to anymore, but because she wanted to. Every meal served safely, every student who left satisfied, every day that passed without a single case of food poisoning was a victory. She had taken down a corruption network that had seemed untouchable, but the real triumph was in the ordinary moments. A student thanking her for remembering they were vegetarian, a teacher complimenting the fresh soup, a parent sending a note about how much healthier their child seemed. As the afternoon wore on, Marlo noticed a new worker starting their orientation, a young veteran who had lost her job after reporting safety violations at her previous workplace. Marlo made a point of taking her aside during break. Let me give you some advice. Marlo said, her voice kind but firm. Never let anyone make you feel small because of what you do. Never let them convince you that serving food is somehow beneath dignity. And if you ever see something wrong, something that could hurt these kids, you come directly to me. We don't tolerate that anymore." The woman nodded, relief visible in her eyes. "I heard about what you did, how you stood up to them. I did what needed to be done, and now we make sure it never needs to be done again." As the final bell rang and the last students filed out, Marlowe looked around the transformed cafeteria with satisfaction. The metal trays that had crashed to the floor that first day were now stacked neatly, gleaming under the new LED lights. The serving stations were spotless, the food fresh and properly stored. The entire operation running with the precision she had once applied to military intelligence. Her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Cray. "Another Apex subsidiary just got raided based on your evidence. 17 more arrests. You started an avalanche." Marlowe deleted the message and put her phone away. That part of her life was truly over now. She had one mission left, ensuring that every child in this district got the nutrition they deserved, served with dignity and respect. The next morning's news would report on the nationwide investigation spawned by the Roosevelt High scandal. Congressional hearings would be called, new federal regulations would be proposed. But Marlowe wouldn't watch any of it. She would be here, in her cafeteria, making sure the breakfast was fresh, the juice wasn't expired, and the students started their day with food that would help them learn rather than make them sick. 6 months later, the Roosevelt High Cafeteria won a state award for excellence in school nutrition. Marlowe accepted it wearing the same apron she had worn on her first day, standing beside Zenith, who was now strong enough to attend college part-time. In her acceptance speech, she said simply, "This award belongs to everyone who believes that feeding children safely isn't just a job. It's a sacred trust." The applause was thunderous, but Marlowe was already thinking about tomorrow's menu. There was work to be done, meals to plan, students to feed. The spectacular had given way to the everyday, and that was exactly how she wanted it. After all, the most profound changes often came not from dramatic confrontations, but from the quiet determination to do ordinary things extraordinarily well. Thaddeus Blackstone would serve his time in federal prison, eating meals that met the absolute minimum nutritional standards. Every day, he would be reminded that the woman he had dismissed as just a cafeteria worker had brought down his entire empire with nothing more than determination, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to let children suffer for his greed. And in the Roosevelt High Cafeteria, where it had all started with the crash of 7 metal trays, students continued to gather for meals that were safe, nutritious, and served by people who understood that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign battlefields but in the most ordinary places, by the most unexpected heroes. Years later, a documentary filmmaker would come to Roosevelt High to tell the story of the corruption scandal that changed school nutrition nationwide. She interviewed dozens of people, but the most powerful moment came when she asked Marlowe why she had risked everything to expose Thaddeus. "I wasn't risking everything," Marlowe replied, standing in the same spot where she had picked up those fallen trays. "I was protecting everything that mattered. Every parent who sends their child to school trusts us with their most precious gift. Thaddeus betrayed that trust for money. Someone had to say enough." The documentary would win 3 Emmy Awards and inspire federal legislation known as the Zenith Act, requiring enhanced oversight of school food suppliers and mandatory whistleblower protections for food service workers. But Marlowe never watched it. She was too busy planning the district's new farm-to-table program, which would connect local farmers directly with schools, cutting out corporate middlemen entirely. Zenith graduated from MIT with honors, her thesis on food safety systems cited in academic journals worldwide. At her graduation, she dedicated her degree to the cafeteria workers who stand guard over our children's health, especially my mother, who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's serving lunch the day after you've received death threats because kids are counting on you. And somewhere in a federal prison in Colorado, Thaddeus Blackstone spent his days working in the kitchen, serving meals under the watchful eye of guards who knew exactly what he had done. Every plastic tray he handled reminded him of that moment when 7 metal ones had crashed to the floor, announcing the arrival of his downfall in an apron and a hairnet, armed with nothing but the truth and an unshakable determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves.